what blockchain is really fundamentally about, people spend, I would say 95% of their time imagining it as currency, some form of currency. Right. And I would say the currency is really the distraction. Like it's a part of it, but the central piece is actually the next iteration of the internet, where the internet comes out of your screen and your phone and your wearable technology, and it lays on the land.
Yeah, and you're a part of it.
Right, and you're a part of it. And so you're interfacing with a cyber physical environment. And they call that the spatial web, or Web 3.0. And so that's the challenge when people spend their time focused on interesting use cases of blockchain, like sidebar things, like we can have this local currency, or we can have a secure place to store our digital media, or we have these, look, we can have some accountable transparency around budgets, or these things. Not that those aren't useful in and of themselves, but if you understand that what this actually is remaking the world with an augmented reality overlay, with a technology that is fundamentally militarized. This is military technology. This is, I mean, Satoshi Nakamoto, whatever, like it's deep state military technology. It didn't just come out of nowhere. And so it's essentially, we're remaking the world as a digital empire that has some nice bells and whistles, but is that where we want to live? And that's sort of where my split in these conversations, and then they've surfaced more recently. People, seem to be upset with me for raising some of these issues, but like there are these two paths. I call it the green path and the scorched path. Do we want to live a life, air quotes, where our internal life, potentially even our thoughts, and our external life is mediated by smart contracts? And that we are tracked in micro contracts, and that the results of those contracts shape how we are valued as human capital, which would be like a credit scoring system. And I touched on that before, but I do want to emphasize this issue I unpacked a little bit earlier this week, the emphasis on China. In reality, the United States developed the credit scoring system in the 50s, and the FICO scores. And many, many people here are already discriminated against based on the credit scoring system. Okay, so in my position on this, because it's a global apparatus, is that we need global solidarity.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Both Wells Fargo and Bank of America, the two largest banks in America, have both had multi-million-dollar lawsuits filed against them due to using the FICO credit score.
But we're not talking about that because it's not packaged like, oh, the scary people in China are doing it. And so my framing is, if we understand this as a spiritual engagement that is a world-based spiritual engagement of carbon-based life against AI and quantum computing, we need everybody on board who can have some clarity around what we're actually up against, because it is a predator system that goes even beyond the central banking system, beyond global finance. It becomes almost an anti-life energetic process. So if we then outsource our anger or our fear onto China, we're not actually furthering our approach to the solidarity of the 99% masses of the world who would not want to be taken over by an AI quantum computer. We are just feeding that, right? And we are outsourcing it. It's convenient distraction that we don't have to talk about Bank of America or Goldman Sachs or these other things, or IBM, or, and like that's homegrown, like the stuff that's coming with Google and Oracle. And yeah, sure, China's really good with AI and facial recognition, and they've layered on, and they're a useful test bed for a lot of this. But there is great synergy between Beijing and Silicon Valley and Israel and Boston. I mean, in London, it is all in, it's a web. So it's
nationalism seems like a farce to me at this point. I mean, the corporations, like you said, I mean, it's Google, Amazon, Huawei in China,
right.
and it's
Ericsson, Nokia, SoftBank.
Baba, yeah.
It's all of that. So if we're not talking about power, and instead we are pointing at other people, that's what they want. That's what Davos wants. And so I don't want to play into that. And I think most people, they just read what they're given, and they pick up a meme, so Chinese social credit. And I did it myself for a while. I mean, I'll admit I'm not perfect, but the more you understand the system, like one of the things, these social impact bonds, they actually are betting on behavior change. and brainwashing children, like, but literally straight up brainwashing them according to a data dashboard. This is this Heckman equation. So Strive Together, based in Cincinnati, is one of the entities working with United Way on this. And they had a whole committee about social emotional learning, SEL, you know, and it sounds good. Like, oh, we care about the whole child's well-being. Really, they want to data mine your child for their mindset. And they had a whole committee of the people who were serving on the social emotional learning committee for Strive Together, which is in like over 70 communities through something called Collective Impact. And one of them, his name is Larry Rosenberger, and he's in Marin County, California. And he was in charge of the FICO program for like 20, 30 years, and is now on the board of every single data analytics, from health data analytics to debt data analytics to training data analytics, every single thing. Larry Rosenberger is on this board, like of like 10 or 15 different things that are all about data analytics and risk profiling people. And he's also on this task force for social emotional learning. So before we start like making it all about them, like what I'm saying is like, you know, don't throw stones if you're in a glass house, right? Like, let's get our own house in order and actually look at what's going on in our own backyard before we start pointing fingers. And that's sort of where I stand on this. Not to say there's nothing going on in China. Sure, there's stuff going on in China. There's a whole lot of stuff going on in Boston and New York and Silicon Valley and Chicago.